They didn't shove me off a cliff, they just drove away laughing and left me to rot. No fight. No scene. Just gravel in my teeth and a powerless phone in my pocket. I didn't chase them. I disappeared. While they toasted my absence, I built a life quiet enough to be forgotten, until I came back holding every truth they buried. She tried to erase me. But some lies don't stay buried, especially the ones that carry my eyes. I stood on the gravel shoulder, watching my wife's taillights shrink into the horizon. The SUV bounced over a dip in the highway, then was gone. The last thing I heard was laughter, hers, tangled with her friends, echoing out the open windows like a cruel joke. Except it wasn't a joke. They didn't come back. At first, I waited because it felt absurd. Maybe they'd just gone to grab something. Gas. Snacks. A cruel prank, maybe. 5 minutes turned to 20. Then the sun dropped low behind the Tennessee tree line, and the parking lot cleared around me. I was 30 miles outside of Knoxville, standing beside a closed rest stop with a drained phone and the kind of silence that wraps itself tight around your ribs. The last text I sent before the battery gave out was, "Where did you go?" No response. That weekend had felt wrong from the start. It was supposed to be a reunion trip with her college friends. 4 women. 1 man, me? I was the accessory. A trophy dragged along for show. They barely spoke to me. Her friends had looked at me like I was a problem. She was different too, more careful, like every word she said in front of me was a chess piece she didn't want to give away. We'd taken separate cars up, but I'd ridden with them to the lake that morning. No wallet, just my phone and keys. When they pulled away, they left nothing behind. Not even a glance. The air turned cold fast after sunset. I started walking because I had to. Shame does strange things to your gait. I didn't hitch. Didn't call out. Just kept walking, mile after mile, until the trees blurred and the pain in my legs drowned out the noise in my head. There were 1,000 ways to rationalize what happened. I tried them all in those first few miles. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they thought I had a ride. Maybe this wasn't what it felt like. But at some point, when the crickets went silent and my throat tasted like dust and metal, I stopped spinning theories. I knew. They meant to leave me. They didn't expect me to make it back. I slept that night under a billboard for a personal injury lawyer. Lay flat on the dirt, jacket pulled over my face, and listened to trucks rattle past like ghosts. In the morning, I pawned my watch. $50 and a look from the clerk like I was halfway to nowhere. He wasn't wrong. I caught a ride with a long-haul driver named Dennis who didn't ask questions and offered me coffee without looking at my face. By the time I got home, it was 3 days later. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, opening a bottle of wine. She froze when she saw me, blinked like she couldn't figure out how I'd materialized. Then she smiled, thin, controlled. "You made it," she said, voice light. "We didn't think you'd actually." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. Her friends were on the couch. One of them laughed like it was some awkward sitcom moment. Another looked at me like I was a stain on the floor. I stared at her, at the woman I married. Her skin looked different in that light, artificial somehow, like she'd been pretending for years and the makeup had finally cracked. I didn't speak. I went upstairs, packed a duffel bag, took my documents, my hard drive, cleared the safe. She didn't follow. That night, while she slept 2 rooms away, I cleared our accounts, transferred my name off everything that mattered. I left the ring on the bathroom sink beside a folded note. "You made your choice." So did I. Then I left. No scene. No goodbye. Only silence. And silence, I've learned, is a hell of a weapon. The bus station in Little Rock was where I learned to stop asking questions with my eyes. You sleep sitting up there, arms wrapped around your bag, and every face looks like they've lost something permanent. I blended in fine. I spent the first week moving like a ghost. No phone. No cards. Just burner cash and distance. I'd memorized the critical numbers, the banks, the passcodes, the accounts she never knew about. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't stupid either. And I made sure she couldn't follow me. 3 states away, I bought a used pickup and an old prepaid phone. Both paid in cash. I used a library computer to file a change of address, one she wouldn't recognize, and rerouted everything that still had my name on it. Then I disappeared completely. I thought about writing more in the note, explaining myself, leaving a trail of wounded words. But why give her that? Why let her believe I was confused, broken, desperate for understanding? The moment she let that car door slam shut and left me on the side of that Tennessee highway, she made a statement. I was excess, something to be shed, so I returned the favor. Erased myself, one quiet step at a time. Back in the city, I tied off every loose thread, signed off shared accounts, pulled my name from the lease. I showed up at the office one last time, early, alone, focused, and typed up a resignation letter that read like it came from someone at peace. They didn't question it. I left my ID badge on the desk. I passed by our old place once, from a distance. Her car was parked out front. The same garden gnome she bought during a weekend market trip still leaned crooked beside the mailbox. It made me nauseous. I never returned. She tried calling, once. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Months passed. I found work in Texas. Dirty work at first. Loading docks, second shift warehouse jobs, but it kept my body busy while my mind rewired itself. I was done chasing explanations. What mattered now was building something she could never touch. Something real. By year 2, I had my own one-bedroom above a diner and a job fixing HVAC systems. By year 3, I had 3 men under me and enough savings to file the LLC paperwork. I named the company after something meaningless. It worked better that way, less to explain. Every time I thought of her, I pictured that moment she saw me walk in 3 days after she left me. That flicker of panic she tried to bury with a smile. Like I was a ghost that hadn't followed the script. That image kept me sharp, focused. By year 5, I had a fleet of vans and enough contracts to keep us rolling year-round. I never dated seriously. There were moments, fleeting, but I could never quite let anyone fully in. It wasn't fear. It was precision. Like a man who's learned the weight of quiet betrayal and refuses to misplace his trust again. There were nights when I'd catch myself scrolling. Old accounts, old connections. Curiosity, mostly. She hadn't changed her name. Why would she? From the outside, her life looked untouched. Perfect even. Photos of wine tastings, charity galas. That same group of friends still surrounding her like a well-rehearsed play. I'd shut the screen and remind myself, it doesn't matter. Then, one night, nearly 15 years to the day, I found it. A cardboard box in a closet I never opened. Inside was an old backup phone, long powered off. I charged it out of boredom. The screen flickered. Slow. Struggling. 107 missed calls. 1 voicemail. I stared at the name. Her. I didn't play it. Not right away. Just held the phone in my hand like it was a live wire, pulsing with the weight of a past I'd already buried. But I knew. Whatever was on that voicemail didn't come from curiosity. It came from guilt. And guilt, when it finally speaks, never tells the whole truth. I didn't listen to the voicemail that night. Just stared at the phone while the glow from the screen bathed the room in a cold, sick light. Her voice was a thumbnail preview, mid-sentence, caught in a frozen audio clip that said everything and nothing. I didn't know how to. I powered it off. That phone sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days, untouched. Like a trigger wired to something deeper. I went to work, held meetings, laughed with clients. I shook hands with contractors who respected me because they thought I was a man who never blinked. But my mind kept drifting. Not to her. To them. The friends. The ones who looked right through me that weekend. I could still picture the way they leaned back on the couch like I was a waiter who'd brought the wrong wine. Her voice, bright and practiced. You made it! We didn't think. I'd played that moment over in my mind too many times to count. You don't forget humiliation like that. You carry it under your skin. I spent 15 years building a version of myself they wouldn't recognize. My name was on trucks now. My business had contracts with the city. I mentored 2 high schoolers every summer because I remembered what it felt like to be discarded. I'd become something clean. Something whole. But that voicemail? It didn't fit the story I told myself. So on the 4th night, I poured a glass of the cheap whiskey I kept around for bad weather and pressed play. Her voice was ragged. Low. I know you'll never listen to this. You shouldn't. But if you do, I need to tell you something. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you vanish again. But you deserve the truth. Back then I was pregnant. I didn't know. She stopped. The sound of her breath, sharp and broken, cut through the speaker. Then, I never told you. I didn't know who the father was. And I made the choice for both of us. You weren't supposed to come back that day. We didn't think you'd ever. Click. That was it. 17 seconds of shattered glass. I stared at the wall for a long time after that. The ice in the glass melted untouched. My chest didn't burn with rage, it just felt hollow. Like someone had kicked open a door I'd sealed shut with steel and silence. She'd had a boy. Maybe mine. Maybe not. But she never told me. Never gave me a choice. The betrayal wasn't just abandonment. It was erasure. That voicemail cracked something. Not in a way that made me spiral. I didn't call her back. Didn't drink myself to sleep. But something quiet and ruthless snapped into place. I needed to know the truth, not for her. Not even for the him. For me. The next day, I took a personal day. I told my team I needed to take care of something from the past. They didn't ask questions. I'd built the kind of respect that didn't require explanation. I started online. She still lived in the same state. Different house. Bigger now. One of those suburban dream boxes with manicured hedges and American flags planted in perfect symmetry. The person looked about 15. Brown eyes, crooked smile. I found photos on old Facebook posts, tagged sparingly. They weren't public anymore, but the remnants were there. The digital ghost of a life I'd never been allowed to know. Then I got lucky. One of her college friends, the same one who laughed when I walked into my own kitchen like I was a trespasser, had posted something years ago on a personal blog. A now-defunct wedding recap filled with inside jokes, blurry photos, and group chat screenshots from their legendary lake weekend. That weekend. The one where they left me behind. And there it was, buried in a feed no one had touched in years. A screen-capped conversation between the four of them. I swear, if he comes, we leave him. She needs to breathe. He's suffocating her. I leaned back and stared at those words. The casual cruelty. The certainty. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't heat of the moment, emotional chaos. It was planned. Calculated. I clicked on the usernames. My former best friend had commented a smiley face under the post. Just one. Like a signature on a contract. I'd wondered how they got my wife to go through with it. How they convinced her to drive away. Now I knew. He was in on it too. I stared at my former best friend's name like it was a splinter working its way back to the surface. I hadn't thought about him in years. Back then, he was the kind of man everyone trusted quickly. Smooth, funny, just enough scars to seem sincere. He was also the only person I'd ever confided in when things with her started to shift. When I told him I felt like I was losing her. Apparently, he agreed. I spent that night documenting everything. Screenshots, saved pages, archived links. I didn't trust the internet not to bury it all the moment I needed it. Then I created a timeline. Every detail. Every post. Every message fragment I could find. If I was going to dig into this, I'd do it the way I do everything now. Cold, methodical, undeniable. The betrayal wasn't fresh. That part of the wound had scarred over. But this revelation, was different. It wasn't about love or heartbreak. It was about identity. A man doesn't just vanish from his own life by accident. They tried to erase me. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I reached out to a friend of mine in private investigations, a guy who used to do contract work for my HVAC firm, but had a background that went deeper. Discreet, sharp, owed me a favor. I didn't give him names, not at first. Just asked what it would take to run a quiet background sweep on someone's life from 15 years ago. Employment, financials, paternity records if possible. He gave me a price. I paid it without blinking. While he worked, I kept my own trail cold. No calls, no social media, no emails from traceable accounts. I bought a second prepaid phone and locked the first one away. If she was reaching out now, it wasn't for me, it was for control. To find out what I knew. Or worse, what I was going to do with it. 5 days later, my investigator sent me a file. It wasn't thick, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in clarity. The boy, hers, was raised under another man's name. A quiet, steady guy she'd married 2 years after I vanished. No fanfare. No engagement posts. Just a courthouse ceremony and a move to a quiet suburb. No mention of me. Anywhere. That name was on the birth certificate. I stared at the scanned document like it was a knife pressed to my throat. Then I saw something that made me stop breathing. The date of birth. 9 months and 2 weeks after the lake trip. Exactly. I closed my eyes and did the math 3 times. It didn't change. She'd been pregnant when she left me. Maybe she didn't know for sure who the father was. Maybe. But she knew it was a possibility. And instead of asking, instead of facing it, she let the silence bury it. Let another man raise what might have been mine. That night, I sat in my truck outside a quiet bar just off the highway. I didn't drink. I just watched the headlights pass by on the main road, thinking about the timeline, about the silence, about the boy growing up calling someone else Dad, while I was rebuilding a life from ashes she lit with a laugh and a car ride. I thought about that voicemail again. I didn't know who the father was. No apology. No effort. Just a weak voice trying to offer a stitched-up version of the truth. And suddenly, I realized something else. If she truly wanted me to know, why wait 15 years? Why now? The next morning, I found the answer. An anonymous email from an unlisted address. No message body. Just a subject line. You deserve to know. Attached was a compressed file. Inside, another audio recording. This one older. Poor quality. Her voice. And another woman, one of her friends. I played it on headphones, low volume. Careful. Her friend's voice came first, hesitant. Are you sure you want to do this? Then hers, sharper, colder than I remembered. He's in the way. Always has been. This is how I get free. A long pause. Then laughter. Not forced, easy, practiced. We'll say it was impulsive, one of them said. He's too proud to come crawling back. And then her again, sealing it like a verdict. He won't. That's why it works. I sat still for a long time. It wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy, intent, an execution of character done in whispers and wine-soaked confidence. They never expected me to survive it. But I did. And now, I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one holding the pen. I chose the cafe carefully, neutral, quiet, too public for theatrics. The kind of place where people lower their voices and stir sugar into their coffee like it means something. She arrived early. That surprised me. She looked older, of course. Time had softened her in places and hardened her in others. Her eyes darted up as I walked in. That mask of control cracked for half a second. Then she smiled. Practiced. Polished. Like she was trying to step back into a role she'd abandoned a lifetime ago. I sat down. Didn't offer a handshake. Didn't order coffee. She broke the silence first. You look good. I let the words hang. She fidgeted with her cup. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. After the message. I stared at her, calm, steady. You said you were pregnant. Her lips pressed together. A flicker of something passed through her face. Guilt, maybe. Or fear dressed up as regret. I didn't know, she said, voice low. Not for sure. You didn't ask. She looked down at her hands. I was scared. Everything was falling apart. I thought I was making the best choice for everyone. No, I said. You made the easiest choice for yourself. You chose silence. You chose to erase me. Her hands curled into fists on the table, but she didn't raise her voice. You vanished, I said. You left me on the side of the road in another state. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I leaned forward. Don't twist this into mutual abandonment. You staged it. You and your friends. You called it freedom. I call it a hit job without the decency of a bullet. She blinked fast, eyes glossing over. I was going to tell you, she whispered. But then you were just gone. And when I found out it might not be yours, I cut her off. It was mine. She froze. I pulled a folded document from my jacket, quietly slid it across the table. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. The DNA results were highlighted in yellow. I watched her eyes move line by line. When she got to the bottom, she stopped breathing. He's yours? She said, voice cracking. I smiled. He always was. She covered her mouth. Tears spilled over, silent and unconvincing. She leaned back like the air had been sucked out of her chest. You don't get to cry, I said softly. She nodded, still trying to keep her face from collapsing in on itself. I didn't mean to steal anything. I didn't know how to fix it. You didn't want to fix it. You wanted to bury it. I stood up slowly. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth. I filed for legal paternity, I said. You'll be getting the papers this week. I want my name corrected. Legally. Permanently. Her face twisted, anger and panic battling behind her eyes. He doesn't know you. Yet. You'll confuse him. You'll break everything. I cut her off, voice steady. You broke everything. I'm just reclaiming the rubble. The mask slipped then. Not all at once. Just enough. Her hands trembled on the table. Her shoulders curled inward, like the room had suddenly gotten too loud. She looked up, eyes glassed over. What do you want from me? She whispered. I tilted my head. Nothing, I said. That's the point. Then I left. The next morning, my lawyer filed the motion for paternity correction. Her side objected. Of course they did. But the DNA left no room for fiction. The state doesn't argue with science. 2 hearings later, I had the certificate in my hand. My name, printed clean and clear. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it fixed anything. Because it proved she failed to erase me. Then I found it. Another file in the anonymous dump I'd received weeks earlier. A voicemail I'd somehow missed. Her voice again. Younger. I told you, he was always in the way. Now she's finally free. It wasn't meant for me. It wasn't even meant to survive. But it had. I played it twice, then once more. And then, finally, I smiled. Not because it stopped hurting, but because the truth had a pulse again. And this time, it was mine to carry. The legal process took 4 months. Longer than it should have, but time had taught me patience. Her attorneys filed delays, appeals, claimed it would be too destabilizing to change what had already been accepted for so long. But DNA doesn't blink, and judges don't respond well to 15 years of silence wrapped in excuses. When the final ruling came down, I sat in the clerk's office alone. They handed me the reissued birth certificate like it was a passport to something sacred. I read my name at the bottom. First, middle, last. It was official. Undeniable. That was the moment I stopped calling it a maybe. He was mine. A son raised under someone else's roof. Another man's name. Another man's story. But the truth had finally breached the surface. Not loudly, but permanently. I didn't contact him right away. I wanted it to be clean. Unforced. The wrong kind of introduction could do more damage than all her lies combined. So I started the same way I built everything else. Quietly, strategically. I created a portfolio. Documents, dates, photos. Everything he'd never been told. I included the DNA results. I included court documents proving the name change. I included the letter I'd written and rewritten 50 times before I got it right. It didn't beg. It didn't blame. It just told the truth. 2 weeks later, I mailed it to the only address I could confirm. Not hers. His school. I figured I'd hear nothing. Instead, I got a call 4 days later. No name on the screen. Just a quiet voice. I got your letter. He didn't call me Dad. Didn't call me anything. Just said he'd read everything twice. Said it felt like reading someone else's story until he looked at the photos and saw his own eyes staring back. We met in a public park. He sat on the far end of the bench when he first arrived, arms folded, face guarded. He looked like her. Same way of tilting his head when confused, but there was something else too. A wariness. A presence. We talked for an hour. Then 2. I didn't press. I didn't unload bitterness or history. I just answered every question he asked. By the time he stood to leave, he said, I don't know what this makes us. I told him that was up to him. He nodded once and said, I want to know more. That was enough. She found out 2 days later. I didn't hear it from her. I saw it in the form of a cease and desist letter from her attorney. Unapproved contact with a minor. A desperate move wrapped in legal formality. Except he wasn't a minor. And I wasn't unapproved. I had legal standing now. I shredded the letter and sent a copy of the ruling back with a single sentence. He's not your secret anymore. She never responded. Weeks passed, then months. The boy, no, the young man, called more often, asked sharper questions, wanted to see photos of me from before, wanted to know why I left. I told him the truth, without venom. He absorbed it all. He deserved the full picture, even if it shattered the one he grew up with. Then, late one evening, I was cleaning out my garage when I found the original voicemail again, the one that started it all. The 17-second echo of a woman trying to explain her silence. I played it one last time. This time, it didn't feel like a bomb. It felt like a record of someone else's fear. Someone who once had control and used it to erase what didn't suit her narrative. She'd raised a life built on omission. I had reclaimed it with fact. No theatrics. No drama. Just steady, surgical truth. And when I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't see the man left on the roadside anymore. I saw a survivor with a name no one could take again. She tried one last time. After the name was legally changed, after the meetings with him became regular, after the lies she'd wrapped her life around finally began to collapse, she called. I didn't answer. The voicemail she left was short, hesitant. A tone I'd heard once before, on that original message, the one she sent too late. This time, all she said was, Can we talk? Not about the past, About everything else. I let it sit in the inbox. Not out of cruelty, out of precision. Because she was still framing the terms, and I wasn't negotiating anymore. 2 weeks later, her email came. Longer. Rambling. Dressed in remorse but stitched through with control. She wanted to meet him. Said he'd always asked questions she hadn't been able to answer. Claimed she didn't want to cause confusion, only to explain. He deserves both sides, she wrote. She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't the one who got to decide that anymore. I forwarded the message to him without comment. Let him read it without pressure. When he asked what I thought, I told him the truth. She had 15 years to tell you everything. She used them to build a silence. If you meet her, you deserve honesty, not stories patched up for comfort. He waited 3 days, then wrote her back. He asked questions, hard ones. She deflected most, claimed she was protecting him, tried to steer things back to memories, to nostalgia he'd never had. He sent me the transcript. She wasn't ready for a version of him that could think for himself. He never replied to her again. A month later, I told him about the wedding. Not mine, a close friend's. Someone who'd seen the worst parts of my rebuild and stood by anyway. I'd be standing beside him, and he asked if I had family to invite. That word meant something different now. I asked my son, my actual son, if he wanted to come. Not as a guest, as my best man. He said yes. Not a dramatic yes. Just a quiet one. Steady. The kind of answer men give when they know exactly what they're stepping into. We stood together at that altar-like bookends to a history too twisted to explain in one speech. No grand declarations, just presence, silent, whole, undeniable. And afterward, when the photos were taken, him in a sharp black suit, me in charcoal gray, we both looked into the lens without flinching. That was the photo I printed. The one I slid into a crisp white envelope with her name written in clean, deliberate handwriting. Alongside it, a copy of the wedding invitation. His name, clearly listed. Best man. I didn't add a return address. Only one short note, printed in black ink, centered beneath the photo. You raised a fiction. I reclaimed the truth. We are whole now. Without you. I mailed it. Not to provoke her. To finish the story.